All right. So good evening, everyone. My name is David Motley, and I'm a proud board member of Art Impact Project. Like in the past couple of months, we've been having some amazing conversations with some very smart people and some very creative minds trying to help give us some tools to experience the world around us in a different way, help create a little bit more understanding, and help enable some very worthy and worthwhile conversations to take place in all levels of our day. So today is not an exception. We're looking forward to speaking to Johanna Buwalda in just a couple minutes. She is a licensed, well, is still a licensed and amazing art advocate in a lot of different ways. She understands and uses art as a healing mechanism. So we'll talk a little bit more about that, and we're so excited to share her story with you tonight. But I'd like to take this moment to reintroduce you to Vicky Morasco, who's the founder of Art Impact Project, to give us a couple words about our Art Impact Project programs coming up and a special event that we're hosting again in person in October.
Yeah, I think you pretty much just said it all. I'm not going to go into the whole spiel about Art Impact Project because everyone on here so far understands who we are and what we do, but a quick overview. Let me just let this person in. Quick overview as to who we are is we partner with mental and behavioral health facilities and schools and after school programs in the Lake County Jail, and we design and facilitate art programming sitting side by side with our participants and trying to help them to express themselves in a healthy way, where a lot of them have a struggle to be able to do that in words. So through the art making process is how we operate. We strongly believe in the power of art making, and that is why we are having this special talk tonight with Johanna. And we also want to tie it into our fundraiser that David mentioned that we're having October 3rd. It is all about the benefit of art. That's what we use that play on words for our event, but it's truly to showcase who we are, what we do, and how we operate. And our mission statement is enhancing emotional wellness through creative expression. So we just want to let you know about the fundraiser and hope that you'll look into that, and we will carry on with our talk.
Thank you, Vicki. I appreciate it.
Okay.
So again, without any further ado, we're going to speak to Johanna Buwalda. She has an amazing story to tell, so we'll tee it up just briefly. She is one of the prime examples of meeting people where they are. Her story may begin in the Netherlands, but she's been through Cambodia, war-torn regions of Congo, Philippines, Inglewood neighborhood of Chicago. I even saw that you spent some time at Vista Health here in Waukegan, Illinois at one point, and you've landed in your happy place. So tonight's conversation is going to be her origin story and a little bit about where she landed and why. But without any further ado, Johanna, take it away.
Okay, then. Wow, you basically did my origin story already, but I live in Eagle River, and indeed, this is like my little piece of paradise. After I worked for, I think, 32 years now with survivors of war, mostly immigrants, refugees, and veterans and their families. I used a lot of art during that time since I was trained as an art therapist when I came to the United States. I started my career in a psychiatric hospital in the Netherlands, actually, right after graduation, and then moved to the Philippines very quickly after that, where I worked in a war zone on a front line with children and families caught in the political armed conflict there that has been raging, I think since the 60s and probably way, way, way before that. Eventually ended up in Chicago, where I lived for over 25 years, and where I met a lot of the veterans that I worked with. over the years. So after all that time, and I think a lot of you know about this, that working with people who have trauma, and having lived in war zones myself, I have encountered things that are not good for people to encounter. It was just time for me to go do something else. But that doesn't mean that I still feel very strongly about my work with survivors of war. So I still do some. I go to Chicago, when COVID allows me to. I go to Chicago and do weekends for veterans and their partners, in which I do a lot of art still, mostly word art, but still art. And here in Eagle River, there are veterans. I have not encountered many of them other than the ones that come to my pottery classes, since I teach pottery right now and I became a potter in Eagle River. But I still use some of my skills to work with mostly adults with cognitive disabilities. So I'm still working on how to make art available on where like you said, David, wherever you are at, where you find a starting point and go from there, and help people feel successful in whatever they set out to do. So I'm not really sure. I think you should ask me the questions, because
yeah, sure.
I'm not really prepared a whole talk.
No, it's okay.
Yeah.
It's okay. We're just very happy to give you the opportunity to say some of the things that you need to say about who you are and what makes you tick. We'll pick those things, additional things out
Okay.
as we have this conversation. So you spoke to Vicki and I a couple days ago about an experience you had doing Reiki in Cambodia. Can you tell us a little bit about that story and why it's transformative in some sort of way? And it's probably one of those things that was early on in your life, and how did it had its lasting effect on who you are and what defines you?
I don't think that was early on in my life. That was maybe, so I've done this work for about 30 some years, and this was about 10 years ago. I decided to take my then 10 and 13-year-old, or something like 11 and 14-year-old children on world trips, since they were young enough to still want to go on a trip with mom. And so I took them to Thailand and Cambodia together with my brother. And it was definitely a transformative experience for them, and partially for me too. So one of the things that I organized at the time was a way for us as a family to. Are we still hearing me? Because my screen changed completely.
We got you.
Okay. So one of the things I wanted for my children, especially, was that we're not just going on vacation, but that they also have something to offer, even though they were very young. And we went and volunteered in a program for children whose parents had passed away from AIDS and HIV, which in Cambodia is a really big deal, because the stigma that we experienced in this country and in my country of origin in the 80s is still extremely strong over there, so that people who suffer from AIDS or HIV are thrown out of their families or thrown out on the street, which is much more difficult over there than when it would be happening here, since there are no services at all for people who are thrown out on the streets and are HIV positive. So there was an organization that had started to work with the children. So that's what I did. I took my children over to this orphanage, and they had the opportunity to play with them and to teach them English, and generally to have a great, different life-changing experience, both for my kids and the kids that were over there, just to have this international interaction. What I did in the meantime is I went with a Buddhist monk who was also American originally, to hospitals where people were dying. And the program that they had set up originally they had tried to engage those people and provide them with meaningful activities and wanting to do all kinds of things, but they didn't have the energy anymore because they were literally at the end of their lives, and they were laying on these cots in hospitals. And hospitals, they are very different from what you might expect, to see here. In that there's a doctor that comes once a week, there's a nurse that comes once a day, and everything else is up to families, which is an issue when you have HIV, since they were thrown out of their families. So there was very little available to them. So because you would have had a family member going to the pharmacy to pick up the medication, for example, it's not provided in the hospitals. So in any case, so the program had started to provide Reiki instead. And
can you describe what Reiki is for
someone? It's to me, it was a little bit of an esoteric kind of thing. It's an energy treatment. So it's the idea is that you're sharing your energy, or in this case, my energy, with people who are needing that energy. And you can do this apparently also long distance, and you can do it in person. And it's not you don't touch much in Reiki, but you can, in the case of the Reiki that we provided, you are very close to people. So you're sitting basically on their beds and holding your hands just basically around their heads, for example, and try to provide them with some kind of energy and positive attitude and positive thought. I am not really sure about, the exact idea of Reiki, but what I noticed was that giving a person for a whole it was an hour and a half, however long it was. I mean, time kind of disappeared when you did it. And you went through a whole process of providing this energy and being on the bed with them and giving them undivided attention. You just completely, in my case, I completely focused on this one individual. And you saw this very sick being, agitated, anxious, lost, lonely person, completely relax. It was just amazing. I mean, I couldn't go draw with them or paint with them or, do any big art project with them. There was nothing left to these people. But what I was able to offer was this complete, undivided 1 hour attention in which they completely relaxed. And most of them fell asleep eventually, just because it was so relaxing.
Johanna, I have a question for you. Along the same lines of this technique that you discovered
of giving energy,
right? The energy. Can you relate that to some of your stories that you actually were able to incorporate your art making or your therapeutic arts and how it was beneficial to the people that you were serving?
Yeah,
energy, but through the actual art.
Yeah. Well, I don't think it's that different to provide the Reiki to other, providing another art activity. And I know as an art therapist, I may really choose the art activity based on what supposedly the diagnostics are, right? But energy wise, just to provide some, even, I don't know what kind of activities you can provide, but say somebody's extremely anxious, which is happening a lot, right? Extreme anxiety. To provide them with a material or and an art activity that is relaxing and that goes slow maybe, but also helping people feel successful, because in our culture, especially in white American culture, a product is extremely, creating a product is really an important thing for people. But providing an activity in which you can really do the process and slow it down for them and provide them with, for example, I don't know, one thing that I noticed with a lot of people with lots of anxiety was giving them wet paper. Do you know watercolor paper? It's kind of a thicker paper and you can make it wet right? And if you put a drop of ink or a drop of watercolor, like a strong, good quality watercolor on that paper, it will just spread like that, right? It will just, and it's like a miracle. It's like something that, you can focus on, and it's beautiful, especially if you have the good, the good quality watercolor. And then you give another drop, and now you have a red drop and a yellow drop. And now in between, it starts to reach each other and it becomes orange. And now you have magic happen, right? So yeah, you can do the same kind of thing with real, like what we would consider art, right? Now, in some of those situations I've been in, there was no good quality art supplies, right? Because I worked in war zones and I could only carry a little day pack. And even if I wanted to buy good quality art supplies, it just wasn't available. What I could get was maybe school supplies. So like, white glue and the cheap crayons and, the manila paper and things like that. But you can still do a lot with that, right? So you just have to become more creative. I really have a strong memory of a group of children who had each watched their parents be murdered by a military force at the time. And there was a lot of course, sadness and depression and behavioral, what we would call in our culture behavioral disorders, but just disorder emotions, like chaos emotions, and very little joy. And all I did was I made them draw with white glue on their papers, on their cheap manila paper, right? All that we had, and we had white glue. And we would make this game where we would run around the building. And in the back of the building was a small pile of sand. Somebody had dropped it there. Maybe they eventually wanted to build something. I have no idea. But we would bury our paper in the sand, right? And then we would uncover our paper and there would be magic, because on the white glue now you could see the outline of what they'd made in sand, right? Now in our in a classroom like what I'm sitting in right now, I have access to colored sand. So you can do even more fancy stuff with that, right? With colored sand. But for these kids, that was just so much joy. And then we would come back together and we would talk about our pictures, and we had very little language in common. My knowledge of the local language is very minimal. So we would go back and make another one and run around. And so even though that maybe not look like relaxing, it created so much joy just for an hour maybe that it was relaxing.
So you described the process, creative process, or the creative process therapy.
Creative process, yeah.
So can you describe to us some of the transformative results that have come through these types of ways of picking through and getting these young people engaged, or the veterans engaged? Because we feel often that those participants in our programs that are more reluctant to do something, the ones that give us the most resistance and the most friction, are the ones that have the most magical things to say, and often are the ones that blossom the most. Can you describe to us that correlation of your creative therapy process and maybe that same example?
Wow. Well, the most resistant groups that I've ever worked with were probably people who were trying to stop using substances, and another group, veterans, especially combat veterans. Those are the two groups I think were the most difficult to engage. I don't like the word resistant too much, because that seems to be like they don't want to get better, and they do want to get better. They're just really worried usually and anxious about what might happen and what they might feel and what might come up, and what other people might think about them if they would engage in crafts and arts and things like that. So the word resistant does not really, I do not like the word resistant.
Oh, I
Um,
totally understand you, but
okay, so
they're reluctant to participate sometimes. How's that?
yeah, it's really scary. I mean, there's this like idea that because I'm a therapist, I can read their minds, or I will be able to read something in their art that they don't know about, and it's like this kind of fear thing that is in there as well. And so I very often, with the group of veterans I work with, I'm like, what do you got to lose? Right? You're here for 3 weeks in this this outpatient program. You come every day, and humor me, just humor me, and see where it takes you. And 99.9% of them would. Some of them would not immediately. They would watch the others for a while. This was a group that I worked with. And once they started working on it, they would usually becoming completely engrossed in it. A project I did is something apparently that you guys have also worked on some. It was a mask making project, but it was a mask making project in that they would work on the inside of their mask to decorate how they felt on the inside, and then on the outside of the mask they would decorate what they were showing to the outside world. They were, they would be very engrossed and then they would be stunned in the end. I mean, it was really remarkable that once we went around the group and we asked if anybody was willing to share what they had done and how it had worked for them, and what they were, what their masks were representing on the inside and the outside, they were just really surprised, because they had always used talk therapy, right? They had given words to how they felt inside, but they had never thought about it as in colors and shapes, and the inside having spikes and blood and goo and gore, and then on the outside they showed sunshine and some anger maybe and things like that. And the vast majority wanted to show these masks to their loved ones, which is not something that I had started out with, right? Because usually I do not, when I work on art with people, I do not have any expectation or even any encouragement that they're making something to show out to the outside world, because I think it takes away from their inner experience and the relaxation if they have to produce something that that they have to show, right? Either in an art exhibit or to their family or whatever. But they almost all chose to show it to their family members. Because they had never really found the words to describe how they felt on the inside and how that didn't match what they showed on the outside. But now they could show it to people. And I think that's why art is so important, because we are very dependent on language to explain how we feel and what our experience is and what our inner world looks like. But not all of us have that language or even experience the world through language. So offering either, what we do, visual arts, and it looks like you do a lot of visual arts as well, or music or theater arts, or, whatever arts, singing, dancing, all of it may work better for to really process and strengthen who you are and where you want to go, and find us, especially when we're talking about trauma, right? It's never going to go away. But we want to make sure that that trauma does not control us, which is often what happens, right? Trauma controls us because it changes our brain. We want to be in control of it. So we need to find a place for that trauma in our lives in a way that doesn't impede us only, but it may stand in our way at times, but we don't want it to be the defining force in our lives. We want to figure out a way to live with that trauma, and maybe it's a big part of us, but there are other big parts of us. It's not our entire identity. We have other identities, and I think art can really help with that.
Why do you suppose art has such magical healing ability?
I don't know if it's actually magical. I just like to think that word. Um, um, I think it bypasses a lot of, um, I honestly don't know for sure, but there are a lot of there's a lot of research now coming out. When I started in '89, there was no research about trauma treatment at all, right? There was a little bit that's research that showed that trauma was bad for people, traumatic events were bad for people. So that was
I
the
want to
research
laugh about it, but that
science.
sounds so
I mean,
simplistic.
it was horrid because I was in the middle of a war zone, and all I could find was, trauma is bad for children. Like, well, duh. Um, but nowadays, we know that trauma changes our brain and the way our brain works. It lives in our bodies, and so and just words may not always, you know. We know insight in trauma does not work. We have known that for a very long time. Just because I know what causes my mental health issues doesn't mean that I'm making a change. So I feel like, and this is, I do not know if the research is out. There's a little bit. Bessel van der Kolk has written a little bit about this, and there's a few others. I think. Oh God, now I have to come up with names. I don't even know all the names.
Oh, you don't have to worry about the names.
Yeah. So there's a little bit more of an understanding that trauma lives in the body, and if you then start using your body in a more expansive way, not just your language, but also your hands and your eyes and your hearing, and experiencing maybe the yuckiness of paint, for example, if you start finger painting or then I think you're approaching it from more than one direction, and start to maybe figure out a different way than just with language,
Yeah.
to place it, to find a place for it where you can hold it and handle it. And if it pops out, if your trauma pops out, which it's going to do, right, is to reel it back in and find another spot for it, and not have it control you at all times.
So I've heard you also say that trauma is contagious. So maybe the trauma that people endure who are in our circle of friends or in our very extended family, sometimes that becomes transposed onto our own psyche, and we may not even understand that either. So can you tell me a little bit about your conversation that we had maybe a couple days ago? You
Sure.
talked about that very thing.
Yeah, trauma is very contagious. Trauma is very contagious to the point where I found, for example, when I work with partners of military or combat veterans, partners and children of combat veterans, that even when their partner is not with them, right? So their military veteran, their combat veteran is not with them. So their military veteran is safely at home, but they go out with their friends. So, for example, the combat vet is a woman, right, who was in Iraq and watched lots of stuff and has a lot of trauma. Now her husband goes out and has a beer with his friends. He's a civilian, and he will walk into a bar and find the seat where he can sit with his back to the wall. Because as a veteran, right, when you walk into any space, you need to be able to see exactly who's walking in and who's walking out, where the exits are, right, what the threat might be. And this civilian spouse has absorbed that. going to a crowded situation like an art fair. I spend a lot of time in art fairs right now. It's really hard. So you start noticing that you're like constantly looking around as well and making sure that nobody is having a weapon, that you're in a safe place. For my personal experience, the last few years I worked a lot with Iraq veterans, Iraq and Afghanistan veterans, and those wars had a threat in them that I had not experienced myself working in war zones in the Philippines and Sri Lanka. It's called an IED, an improvised explosive device, and it's often just something along the road that looks, nothing special, a garbage bag or a toy or, anything that it looks inconspicuous. It looks fine, like a bottle of beer that's sitting on the road, or and you can put an explosive in something like that you can detonate with, for example, an iPhone or a remote control from a TV and things like that, right? So a lot of our military veterans, our more recent younger military veterans, have trauma from these IEDs. And one morning I was driving to work. I was in Chicago, and we have alleys, and in the alleys are garbage cans all over the place, of course. And there was this big pink teddy bear sitting on one of the trash cans. So somebody had probably just put it out there thinking, if the garbage doesn't take it, maybe one of the garbage pickers who come through the alleys earlier in the day will take it and still use it. But my reaction to it coming out of my garage was, oh my God, there's an IED in my alley. And my second reaction was, oh my goodness, I need to take a break. Because I had never personally been in a situation where I had to feel unsafe because I'm an IED, but I had absorbed, that reaction, that fear from IEDs from my clients. So I turned around and went home and called my supervisor saying, I need a day off. This is what just happened. This is what just happened to me. I need a day off. And, luckily I had a very good supervisor, and he said, yes, you need a day off. And I did. I went and had to take care of myself for the day. And I personally use art to come back to my center. So I like
that is a great segue.
Yeah, so I like to go back to art. So in my case, I really like pottery, and I like pottery on a pottery wheel, but also, hand building, which is any other pottery that's not made on a pottery wheel. But the pottery wheel to me was really centering. Literally, you're centering the clay. It's a very sensuous, tactile activity, and it's also, in my case, I make useful things. I make bowls and mugs and vases, things that you can actually use that are very tangible, and that helped me center myself back to where I needed to be in order to be of help to other people. I always kind of think about it if the oxygen mask, I don't know if everybody's been in airplanes, but they always say, put the oxygen mask on yourself before you help others when you're in an airplane. And I think that's exactly what you need to do when you want to help people with trauma. You need to make sure that you put that oxygen mask on yourself before you can be useful to other people. And I think people who work with trauma, or at least people like me who work with trauma, 40 hours a week and often much more, because I was often available, after hours as well. We need to make sure that we take care of ourselves. Otherwise, we're going to be useless, and we're going to just hurt ourselves, because trauma is contagious and it's not good for any living beings.
And it's not necessary to apologize to take time for your own self-care.
No.
Oxygen mask.
No.
Most of us are very probably A-type personalities, and we're always so worried about caring for others that we're often a second banana to our own life. So
Mhm.
it's totally true. But I wanted to make sure that we had the opportunity for the folks in the audience to ask some questions if they have any. This has been a great conversation so far, and we don't want to leave you out. So if anyone uh, here in our Zoom would like to raise their hand and ask a question, the, the forum and the opportunity is available to you right now.
Johanna, I don't know that you know this, but several people who are here are actually art advocates for us. They are out on site with our partners, a couple of board members. Beth is our program director, so maybe she could speak to programming. But and we've had some artists pop in and out too. So
Okay.
just the benefit of art for all of us from all of these different aspects, especially some of the items that you've talked about for us to be able to go and turn around and take back with us on site when we're working with the participants, I think will be helpful.
Okay.
So what do you guys think? Mary Claire, where are you? There you are.
Okay, it's in the dark. Sorry, I'm outside on my porch. So I'm a potter, Johanna.
Ah,
My niece is the same spelling, but she says Johanna. So
uh-huh.
it may be because she's from the United States and you're from the Netherlands. But
Okay.
anyways, I'm a potter, and one of the things I've found is that when I can't throw on the wheel, I hand build because I'm not centered. And I wondered if that's similar when you were talking about what you find being a potter, and what you find in working with clay and your experience working with clay.
I think that's a really interesting idea that because there are day, of course, when you're doing pottery, as you know, it's like centering is so hard some days, right? Some days
Right.
it's like, oh my God, it's not going to happen for me today. I've never thought about that way, but I'm actually really interested in the idea that maybe because we are not centered ourselves that day and need to go do something else like hand building, and then come back to it once we are more centered. I find that what I do sometimes on those days is I go take a long walk, and that helps, and then I come back to it. But I'm going to try that. I'm going to try to do some hand building the next time that I have a day when I can't get anything centered, which, still happens occasionally.
It happens.
Absolutely.
It totally
Well, when you're, to me, when I'm hand building, I'm wedging clay and I'm throwing it down, trying to flatten it out to make it, before
Right.
I use the slab roller. And that was my, personally, that's kind of what my experience has been, is that, oh, well, that gets out something in me that makes the leisure. So, well, we're just
throwing things and using physical labor, and
yes,
I definitely think that has a place. As an art therapist, I had sometimes youth with lots of anger issues and doing things that required a lot of physical energy,
right.
like the running with their paper to the sand heap and covering it up. But if I, sometimes in other places I had more supplies and more, but yeah, I would do things like, I would have hammers and chisels, which is not necessarily considered safe here, but in the Netherlands, that was just a basic art therapy kind of supply. And just going at it was just way more useful to a kid like that than, let's make some, some watercolors.
Yeah, it's more of a full body experience.
Yeah. And if trauma lives in the body, to use
right.
the whole body, I think can be really, really helpful. Mm-hmm.
Right. I'm curious. One other question, and I'm sorry if I'm taking over on this, but
oh no, we're happy to listen to pottery talk.
How did you? I learned to throw on a wheel that was a kick wheel. I have an electric wheel now, but I found that was a very good way to learn because it's very physical, and the wheel goes as fast as you want, and it slows down. It kind of is the whole process. And I wondered if you learned on on a kick wheel and it or not, and how that
I
influenced
learned
you.
on a kick wheel 40 years ago.
Yeah,
And when I lived in the Philippines, I had the opportunities a few times to still throw on a kick wheel or one of those wheels that had the beam that goes
yeah,
back and forth.
yeah.
Um, but yeah, I don't think I have worked on a kick wheel for the past 30 years. So I don't know. I don't know, but I can see how a kick wheel may also be useful. To have the whole body involved.
Yeah.
Um,
I don't have a kick wheel. I have an electric wheel. It's
I do too.
convenient.
Yeah.
It's easier, but it is something I remember in terms of process,
Right.
and I think it says something about how we do things as trying to incorporate the physical with the mental and the spiritual, really. And
Mhm.
it's like when I center on the wheel now, I usually do it with my eyes closed, or I'm looking out somewhere.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it's not look. And they say kids really learn how to more easily than adults because they don't let their head get in the way.
Right. They're not
So,
afraid. Yeah.
and I think that that's the whole idea of looking at things with our broaden our senses, not just our mental.
Hmm.
We got to get our mind out of it. Sometimes our mind gets in the way,
Hmm.
and mind sometimes is ego. So trying to get your body involved, and so
Hmm.
so
Yeah.
thank you. This has been
Yeah.
thank you, appreciate it.
So,
Yeah. And it doesn't have to be clay. So like
No,
I often have adults, right, who are like especially in an art therapy or in an art, for adult kind of situation that are afraid and they're worried about not being an artist and things like that.
right.
that was
And
the next question.
so I do sneaky things like leaving some art books of with art by Jackson Pollock or by what's his name, Basquiat, on the tables, and then and they're looking at that and they're like, "Oh my God, that's art!" And I'm like, "Yeah, you know how much it costs to buy a Jackson Pollock painting." And then I can just spread out big papers, and I usually do this project outside, because it's very messy. And I give them lots of paints, and they just go and splash with these brushes on the paint and making these Jackson Pollock kind of situations. But they would never given themselves the permission to do that kind of stuff. So you have to kind of sometimes be sneaky about how
Right.
to have that little voice in their heads that stands in the way of them expressing themselves, leave the room long enough for them to actually engage in something, and in this case something that's very physical.
Certainly, I think that sometimes people are afraid by the word art.
Yeah.
They don't identify themselves as artists.
No.
They don't believe that they have creativity.
Mhm.
Yet, when they get into that zone or that flow moment of the creative process, it's very liberating. But we often see that when someone gets stuck in that ignition of the creative process, it's even harder for them to get started. The writer's block, I think is what it's called when it's an author or somebody like that. But it's an easy way to activate people's mindfulness and get their negative energy, whatever that ends up being, and turning it into something positive. And I think your art and your ceramics are a great liberation for you too.
Right.
Can you tell us a little bit about how awesome and amazing it feels to actualize your dreams and be in a position right now to have your own studio and to do your own thing, be creative? Because you've gone through a pretty long life of amazing help of other people, putting yourself at your own peril, but you've actualized something really important for your life too. Can you talk a little bit about how you feel?
Well, I'm still really struggling with that because I have to tell you that, like right now, for example, we're bringing a lot of people that fled Afghanistan to Fort McCoy here, just a few hours away from me, and I feel still a responsibility for um, going over there because they're looking for volunteers, and I feel strongly that I am somebody and one of the not that many people that have the experience of working with um, refugees like that, people who are just coming right out of war zones, and um, who's going to do it, right? So I have to go do it. So I'm still having it still has a strong pull. um, and then we just lost another 14 Marines in Afghanistan, and so I'm still in touch, over the years with a lot of people who are combat vets, and who are struggling with this loss. And I feel responsibility to try to support them and provide something for them. And um, so so yeah, I'm extremely happy that after 30 some years of just doing war work, which I couldn't continue doing the way I was, and then I have this, I had this dream, literally had this dream that I would drive along this forest road, and I'd come around the corner and there would be a little house and a studio, and that's literally what I have. Vicky has been to my place, and she knows you drive down this little lane, you come around the corner, and there it is. I have that, but at the same time, I'm often still, conflicted with, that I should be doing something to help other people, and how I'm going to give that a place in my life, I don't know yet. I have to figure that out. It's very difficult too, because since COVID happened, I was still working every 2 months. I would drive to Chicago and do a week of work with combat veterans and their partners, and it was really important to me to continue offering, something that I was good at. And it's gone because we're not bringing a lot of people into a same room for a whole week. It's not safe to do. So yeah, I'm struggling. I'm struggling with that at times.
We're
So
glad for you that you got the opportunity to have been able to create this little sanctuary for yourself.
yes,
And
yeah.
you've got the choices of where you can go with that, with your other work, and how you
I,
want to continue or hold off on it.
I will continue, and I do. Via, we have so many more options now with social media, and people call me and text me, and so I still do a lot of that.
You can come down here and volunteer with us.
Yeah.
Oh, speaking of that, does anybody else in the audience, any of our advocates, anybody have questions? We've got an art teacher in the group. Mrs. Halloran, I see you're going by your teacher name. You're muted.
I'm sure.
Hi there.
Hi.
I am sure that is just on there because of Zoom teaching.
Yes, I bet.
That's glad that's finished. I'm so happy to hear from you, Johanna. Johanna? Is it Joanna or Johanna?
Johanna.
Johanna. Thank you.
No problem.
Amazing work that you do, and thank you so much for sharing all your ideas and background. It's just fascinating. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
How do you
don't have a question.
How do you
gave me a lot to think about. Thank you.
I'm just thinking about you as a teacher, and you're having to go back into a classroom right now with all the, wearing masks, the kids wearing masks, the distancing, but also the kids come in with an experience that may or may not have been traumatic for them. You as a teacher who has to respond to so many kids with, big feelings. I really am thinking a lot about teachers at the moment, about how they're going to manage this. And then, the whole emotional stuff about masks and no masks and vaccines and no vaccines and,
all
all
right?
all
The
this
rules
stuff.
changing.
Yeah,
hard on adults, but really hard on children
yeah, and
to
on
process it
teachers who have
all.
to negotiate that, with all these individual, because kids, and then also their parents and their fears.
Yeah,
So yeah,
yeah.
I really, I think you guys need some art therapy yourself, and make sure you take care of yourselves, because man, yeah.
But
Well,
it does create, sorry to interrupt, it does create an opportunity for me to ask a question of the entire group. How do we teach empathy? How do we get other people to be empathetic to some of these needs, especially in a time where we are mostly closed off to one another for at least 18 months? How do we pull some of this back and create that tactile awareness and that common understanding that helps us have good conversations? How do we teach young people and even older people to be empathetic?
Well, by example, I think as different children struggle with assignments or even in interpersonal communications in the classroom, it's kind of on a daily, minute by minute, how you react to the children. I have them do breathing lessons. Sometimes we start a class where everybody just has to sit down and relax. The beginning of the year, everyone is very pumped up, and there's all kinds of procedures, just basically getting through the art classroom safely. And we try to have everyone relax at the beginning and listen to a little bit of the procedures, but then get your chance to get in your hands dirty at the same time. And you have a short window with art classes. So I try to keep the lessons really simple. And as far as teaching empathy, we do incorporate the ideas of um, how you treat others into all the daily lessons and things that inspire our artwork. We talk about feelings a lot, and I'll meet on a little rug at the beginning, and sometimes I'll read a little story. And this one that we started with today was all about feelings. What makes you sad and what makes you mad? And then the kids often want to share their feelings. So we kind of do a little talk at the beginning. It's one way that we start to share empathy. So many ways.
Right, and then start to also attach it to maybe colors and shapes. It's what I sometimes do. It's like, okay, so, and then I give them pictures of their body, or I make them draw, how they make like outlines of their bodies, and um, and then where does it feel when you feel angry? What color is that? And where does that color reside in your body? And connect it back to, because trauma is sometimes, or feelings are sometimes so abstract, but then put them back into their bodies. So yeah, I love those kind of activities where you're connecting the books, like, I don't know, my many colored days. I don't know if you know that book, but it's one of those books where you talk about, and then I feel this color, and then and then put it back into their bodies. And yeah, I've done a lot of those as well. It's fascinating to do that with kids. And then, I don't know if you have the opportunity then to come back to that later on. I know you have probably 30 kids in a room, and you don't have the luxury that I have when I have just 5 or 2 even. But
Well,
yeah,
I do try to have we call them critiques, but really it's discussions. And then
right.
I have words, all adjectives all over.
Oh
I kind
yeah.
of emphasize that over dexterity in the wrist. It's
Yeah.
more about how you feel. It
Yeah.
doesn't matter if it's perfect. You don't have to feel that kind of pressure.
Right.
So we do try to talk about
Yeah.
feelings in art and using adjectives.
Yeah. 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 Because a lot of kids don't have the
What
all
is the
words.
word? I should know this being a teacher, but I can't think of it right now. Where feelings they have colors, like you were saying. People see
Synesthesia.
this way. What is it?
Synesthesia.
That's what I couldn't come up with it. Yes, I think that's amazing.
Yeah. Yeah. It is. It is.
Well,
yeah,
So
well, this is great, really good timing because we're starting all of our in-person programming up again. Well, we've already started it back in April and May, but we're going back into the schools next week, actually, right, Beth? Next week? Yeah. So we're ramping up and preparing for what these kids are coming back into the building with. It's going to be a lot of trauma for some, and just a lot of fear and uncertainty on everyone's part, teachers, us, the whole deal. So this is a timely talk for us. We appreciate it. And does anybody have any last comments or any words? We're going on 8 o'clock here, so we don't want to keep everybody up too late. No?
Well, I'll make a quick observation. I love your pottery. I love the muted colors that the earth tones and the very amazing symmetry that it brings with the lines and the symbolism. Part of it reminds me of Asian stoneware of the Japanese area, but then also meshed with some Mayan or Mesoamerican tribal motifs. So I really love them. Can you tell us your web address? So if anyone on the call would like to see more of your examples of work.
Sure. So I have an Instagram, I guess it's called a page, I'm not sure, an Instagram account, and it's Johanna B Ceramics. I also have a Facebook page. It's also Johanna B Ceramics. Yeah, please take a look. I have an Etsy account if anybody wants to ever purchase one, but there is nothing in the store right now because I'm in this situation that for the first year I'm selling my pottery, and I don't have enough. I need to work really hard to keep up, which is kind of a luxury problem. Again, right, one of those things I need to balance because making pottery really centers me and it gives me joy, and I don't want it to become this stressful thing where I have to make 100 mugs. I'm not a production potter. I think a lot of my pots have maybe some Asian influences. You said some people have mentioned Native American. Some people have mentioned Frank Lloyd Wright. And I personally think a lot of it comes from my upbringing on mid-century modern straight clean line furniture. The kind of Danish and kind of lines. And lately, just recently, I had the opportunity just before COVID to return to the Philippines, where I worked 30 years ago, and was quite traumatized there. And I had never been able to bring myself to go back. And I went back, and there I lived at the foot of a volcano, a beautiful, beautiful volcano, which is considered the most perfectly coned volcano in the world. I mean, that's what they say, right? And it's a gorgeous volcano. So now, since then, some of my line work has, become those kind of triangular things that look like volcanoes. So even though I do mostly straight lines, I think you can still see a lot of, of my experience in them, even though it's very abstract.
Just to give everybody a little heads up, Johanna is very generously agreed to donate a piece for our fundraiser. So,
oh yeah,
so you have to come to the event so you can buy a piece of her pottery.
Yeah, here. This one came from the Philippines probably because it has. See, it starts having triangles. It's green on the inside. And this one's way more abstract.
Beautiful.
And it's red on the inside. So yeah. You'll probably get one of these.
Yay. All right.
Thank you.
Everyone, it's been an amazing conversation. We hope that you got something out of it worthwhile and memorable. Johanna, you are a shining star. We really appreciate spending some time with us tonight.
Thank you. This was really fun. I haven't talked about this for a long time, so this was really fun. Thank you.
This was great. Thank you very much.
All right.
Thank you to all of you for participating. Special note and thank you to Beth McKenna from the Art Impact Project team here, and all of you as art advocates in your own regard, and also for the Art Impact Project. We really appreciate it. And Sarah, as a board member, shout out to you as well. So You're all amazing. You're all doing great work, and we really appreciate your time, talent, and treasure with making some transformative things happening in other people's lives and helping support the world.
And to my son, hi Anthony,
Oh, Anthony.
calling from LA.
you.
All
Thank
right.
you for doing this.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Bye.
Have a good evening, everyone.
Good night.
Bye.
Good night.
Night.